starting from down in Glen Iris, just starting out from the side of the road here. So we'll let it get the route. What is it? 4 o'clock. So a little bit before peak hour, although maybe people are beginning to get there. 15-minute drive. Let's see how we go. So press and hold. So look, it is very windy. Actually, I did notice as I was driving home today, the car was like swerving in the lanes, and I think that ended up being because it was so windy. It was sort of like buffeting against that, which you sort of see people do, right? Like when it's quite windy, people do struggle a little bit to be able to stay in the middle of that lane and be able to, you know, keep centered and not sort of rock back and forth. So even the car had a bit of a problem with that, which was a little bit interesting. All right, our little left-hander here. Now, it has actually been completely ignoring this red here, which isn't ideal, although this time it seems to have noticed it, which is good. Or maybe is it just stopping for that pedestrian? I mean, even this bloke here, so it's in a red, you shouldn't be going forward here. But people get pretty confused about what's happening. So he does actually notice it, which is interesting, because it hasn't before. That is something about the system I have noticed, is that everything is like just a little bit different every single time. I had an issue before coming back here off the M1 where like it just wouldn't get into that left lane because there was just a car sitting, you know, next to us. You know, it didn't speed up to get around, didn't pull back. In the end, I had to speed up to get around the car and get into the correct position because the car just, you know, just didn't think about it early enough and wasn't anticipating it early enough, and then wouldn't make the decision quick enough. So in that instance, once again, I think it is about, you know, trying to help the system do that. In the States, they've got different driving modes, and I wonder if, you know, one of those modes maybe, you know, it's a bit more aggressive in getting across into that lane. And we're actually, no, this woman was going to let us through, but then didn't. That's a classic Range Rover move, I would say. She almost waved us through, and then she accelerated as she was waving towards us. So I think, yeah, that's not very good, to be honest with you. So we've got a bunch of cars here. There's some cars stopped on the left here. This does take a while. Normally you need a train or something to get out here, but we've got an opening after this red car. Let's go. We are good. That was very good. And there was a car sort of speeding up on us, but it went anyway, which is quite handy. Now, all these cars on this left-hand side here are stopped. It's a park, and we're not gonna get in that lane. I see other cars accidentally getting into that lane and then just being stuck there and not being able to get past. So that's good. We're gonna go through on the yellow. You like to see that. And yeah, overall, that was pretty well done to get out of there. It's pretty complex at this time of day with the trains coming past. I don't think it's school holidays, but there's a couple of schools up there and, you know, all that sort of thing. So plenty of traffic. Here's an example where it's actually just going a bit slowly, like it's, you know, 49. I can just give it a punch with the accelerator, get it up to 60 and let it know that's where we want to be. You know, it's not a big deal. I think it's interesting that like the way it drives isn't necessarily the way that you would drive. You know, maybe it's a touch more cautious than you are, or at the lights where you might have tried to get into a lane where, you know, if there are two cars here and no cars here, you might have tried to move into that lane. But it's just different, I would say. You know, it's not, you know, it's definitely worse than you would drive, I would say, but it's not miles off, and it's just different. It's a bit more leisurely, you know. It's kind of, it's like when it's better than a lot of Uber drivers and taxi drivers that I've been in the car with, but it's a bit like when you're sitting in the back of an Uber and you don't really care about them like trying to outright make the fastest pace, or like, you know, you're not really conscious of like where they are on the road or what they're doing, because I mean, let's be honest, you're on your headphones and you're, you know, watching bloody YouTube or something. So it's kind of like that, where if you like really pay attention to like each individual decision and like analyze it against the decision that you would have made, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, it's you know, it can feel like it's a bit off, but if you think about it as like someone is driving you, and you know, you don't really care about how you would, you know, I'm never in an Uber going, oh, this is how I would have taken that corner. Like, you're never thinking that, but in here you kind of are. And it's probably because you are in the driver's seat, so it is a little bit different. But if you think about it like that, it becomes a lot more, you know, relaxing, and you're not too worried about. And look, let's be honest here, like, all of that work to do all of that, like, you know, what do you get? 30 seconds quicker to your destination. So, you know, it's all a bit of a waste of time anyway. So nice little stop there just behind the car. I imagine this car on our left is going to absolutely zoom past, given what I just saw as he was coming up on our left-hand side there, and he's already creeping forward. So hopefully we just let him head across and we can just keep on going down. But looks like our time's jumped up to 19 minutes as well, so maybe there's some traffic. One thing I have noticed is that, I mean, not noticed, but let's be honest, that navigation can be pretty shit sometimes. So it's actually taking me a brand new way this time. So let's see. There might have been a bit of an accident or something up ahead that's having me avoid, or some heavy traffic somewhere that's having me avoid. So not too sure what's going on there. So it's a bit of a longer drive. Pay attention to the road. So that's, yeah, and that's happened. I was looking at the screen there. I wasn't really looking at the road. I was seeing where it's taking me, and it noticed. I have seen a couple of times it's given me a little sign up here that says attention monitoring is not enabled. What's going to happen here? Whoop, we're going to go, and we're going to, I mean, you know, I know it's a little thing, but we didn't brake hard. We didn't panic. We just kept going as we were, and we were fine. So, you know, that was, you know, once again, just quite a nice little thing there. Yeah, a little bit of traffic jam, and this is where it is quite nice. Is this, you know, pretty boring drive. I keep saying, people, you know, you keep reading on forums and things. People are going, oh, but don't you like driving? Like, don't you want to drive the car? And I think, like, let's be honest. I've got a Model Y here. I've got a family, and a Model Y is, I think, probably the best family car you can have. Right, heaps of space, doesn't cost them anything to run. You know, comfortable. You know, enjoyable to drive, that sort of, like, you know, punch of the electric motor. But, like, I'm not out on a racetrack. I'm not, like, down the Black Spur every weekend with my, you know, two-door Porsche or something. Like, I drive because I have to drive, and I do enjoy driving, but I'm commuting now, you know what I mean? It's a very different thing. And I think that's what, you know, people don't really see it like that. Like, do you enjoy driving to work? Like, do you put on your driving gloves, and, you know, when you're heading down to go to the footy or drop your kid off at swimming lessons or whatever? Like, no, of course you don't. Look, we're gonna head over here, and that's not a bad idea because there's a huge queue of cars up here trying to get right. Like, of course you don't, because you don't enjoy the driving experience of the school run. Like, you're not cutting the apex, and, you know, that argument to me doesn't really hold any weight. You know, maybe these people are trying to cut the apex of every suburban road, and, you know, let's be honest, that could definitely be the case. But, you know, I've got no interest in that sort of thing. So, you know, just the general commute, yeah, I am happy to have someone else drive. Like, that's not a problem to me. That doesn't concern me. And, you know, I like fast cars, and I like watching F1, and, you know, I've driven on tracks, and I've done that stuff. And if I wanted to do that, then I would, you know, I'd buy a car that enabled me to do that. You know, it's not that complicated, at least in my eye. But, you know, I'm not going to sit on forums and try and convince people of that. So that's just my view on it, really. Is I'm not, you know, when I'm commuting, I'm not doing it for outright pleasure. I'm doing it because I need to be somewhere. So, all right, coming through down here. It's been quite a slow little drive. And I mean, look, that's to my point. This isn't a fun drive. Like, sitting here waiting for people to move and waiting for lights and then not being distracted. That's not a fun and enjoyable experience. So, yeah, that just doesn't really hold too much weight for me. So we're just heading down here. We're sort of going around the sort of, Ben really wants to get in contact with me. Really, we're going around here like the sort of Chadstone sort of area. I think we're going to head like back around the back of Chadstone. If we were to go to Chadstone, the navigation into and, you know, actually finding a park doesn't work very well. You know, if I look at some of those videos of the States, that's a big improvement of the new. Oh, there go the windscreen wipers for no reason. Haven't fixed them. But yeah, the new version in the States, that seems pretty specifically targeted at like end of trip. And again, pretty sure they're on auto. Yeah, I don't know. It's decided that's what it wants. You know, they're pretty. Yeah, V14 seems pretty focused on end of trip. You can choose, and these sort of American things, but a parking lot or a multi-story parking or whatever it might be, and it seems to do a pretty good job of running up and down the aisles and then finding a park. This doesn't really know what to do, I would say. So yeah, that's not great. But like the way I've sort of viewed it now is, and it wasn't too bad before where we started, where we just we're parked in a side street and we just headed off. That's fine, but the way I've used it now is I sort of get it on towards our destination. Like I'll get it onto the road or whatever. I won't necessarily start it from park, and we're gonna have to move to the right hand side here. Has it seen that? It has. And that was quite quick. I mean, look, I noticed that white car there, and then a second and a half later the car had, so that was pretty good. Take that. But yeah, I sort of get it going. I might drive for 30 seconds just to get us onto the road, and then I will tap the stalk down and let the car do the rest of the driving. And then, as we get into the final turn into wherever I'm going, that's when I'll take over and we'll go from there. Interestingly, if you do take over, it'll give you a little message here saying, hey, what happened here? And you can give a little voice note. Imagine it tags that, and somewhere in a data somewhere it transcribes that and then turns that into something that the system can use. But when you disengage, not too far from a destination, it doesn't actually ask you to put in a reason for the disengagement. So they know that. I think that people aren't using it to drive exactly where they want to go. Had an interesting moment the other day where the car actually pulled into my driveway, which was quite interesting. Normally it sort of gets a bit confused and panics and stops sort of in the middle of the road, which is fine. Like I live down a very, very quiet side street, so that doesn't really bother me. We're going to let this guy in. No, we're just going to keep going. Bad luck, Porsche. A bit of karma for the Range Rover before, but yeah, it'll just sort of panic and sort of sit in the middle of the road. But the other day it actually put the indicator on and turned right and drove up my driveway, which is, yeah, I mean, that's pretty good if it's able to do that and just get me home. So, but yeah, still got another 14 minutes here, and it's going to take us, that's going to be an interesting right-hand turn from there. Yeah, see, I mean, if you look here, I would have turned right up here and then got onto, it's not a back street, but it's like not a, yeah. Anyway, we'll see. Then once again, the navigation, I mean, I've said it a few times, but the navigation really lets the whole system down. Even when you go and change it, apparently they use Mapbox in Australia, and I bloody went in there. I saw a guy on Reddit who said, if you submit a thing here, they get into it quicker. So I've submitted a thing to try and get it into my house, but I don't know. It's pretty shit. Yeah, but I might stop talking now, and we'll chuck some music over the top of it, and we'll see how the rest of the drive goes.